evening and welcome back. All Home Office staff will be trained on Britain's history of migration and race after the department was slammed in critical Windrush scandal report. And you might be thinking initially that, hey, this is a good thing because although history does not repeat, it does rhyme, and those who are not aware of history are doomed to repeat it, in which case it's good to know about what's happened before to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And certainly valid point, yes, very good. Except in this instance, it's far too close to critical race theory for my liking, which is to say that it is not, here is an objective view of the past in order to understand mistakes previous people have made, but instead it is pushing a narrative to say, hey, we've got to treat people differently based on their race. And that's precisely the opposite of what we want to do. So they're trying to say that we should be looking at people instead of cases, which is fantastic rhetoric, but essentially means nothing. Because, sure, you could look at a person, but what you actually need to be looking at is the case that's brought forward and what it's all about. Just looking at the person on their own doesn't tell you anything worthwhile from a legal standpoint, and it's completely irrelevant. It's lovely and it sounds delightful and very personal and friendly, but it's utterly useless. So as they go on to say, Home Office published an improvement plan in response to an official inquiry. Home Secretary Priti Patel said Windrush generation waited too long for justice, and the department also reiterated its pledge to review the hostile environment policy. And it seems to be that although Boris Johnson does seem to be putting through things against critical race theory ever so slowly behind the scenes, that instead our Home Secretary Priti Patel doesn't quite seem to be the barbarian that she used to be renowned for being, particularly when it came down to illegal immigrants. Instead, it seems to be a little bit more subversive. And yes, by all means, you do wish to support people who are legal migrants, and if they wish to assimilate and come to a country that they're proud to be in, then by all means do encourage that. And, of course, there were mistakes made, terrible mistakes made, which led to the Windrush scandal, of course. And the whole thing in itself from 1948 shouldn't have happened in the first place. It was the shrinking markets fallacy, essentially, to say that we now need more foreign labour because we haven't got enough people here, which is just delaying the problem and it's never going to fix it. So, no, that's not going to work, especially seeing as it went on for 25 years. That isn't going to help in the slightest. And yes, it will continue to be done so. And then the fact that, of course, some of them were treated as illegal immigrants and threatened with deportation was dreadful. It was a terrible mistake, of course. I don't think any of us are denying that at all. And that should be sorted out as best as possible, no doubt. Does it mean that, of course, they've got millions of pounds they intend to hand out in compensation for these people? Not necessarily. Is that a kind of policy that the British public would support? No. As we see here, that the majority of Windrush scandal compensation claimants are still without payment, after the scheme pays out £1 million to 143 victims, despite 1,480 applicants, meaning 10 times as many, meaning £10 million if they wish to continue this along. And that will, of course, mainly be used for the children instead, but that averages out to be about £70,000 per person, which is a nice retirement pot, I think we can all agree with. But the fact that the government has decided, under a Conservative government as well, to say, well, hey, you all need to have this training. It's very, very reminiscent of unconscious bias training to say that you might not be aware of what you're doing, but we are, in which case you need to therefore be aware of what you're doing without being aware that you're doing it. And it's exactly the same vein that they're bringing this in. So, although it sounds good, and it sounds lovely in order to not repeat history, it's far more malicious than it may first seem, and it is just to undermine any nationalistic pride that Britons may have. The idea is to take away the independence and sovereignty to say that, well, we are a country with borders, we are a developed nation, therefore we are Britain first. And it is to take that away to try and then smear anybody who would like to make a great country as racist or xenophobic in order to push the narrative to create power for themselves. And that is literally what it is all about. The idea of using these oppressed classes isn't to help them out, it is just used as tokens for the people who are spouting this to get into power themselves. And this is yet another example of that. So yes, mistakes were made, and we endeavour for them to be sorted. Does it need such a cataclysmic change? No. Does this show that government intervention is almost always fallible and shouldn't be encouraged in the slightest? Yes. And is that the main tenet underpinning almost all of my content? Yes. Would it have fixed this problem because it wouldn't have had people rushing in as the Windrush generation in the first place? Yes. Was there such a big labour shortage and lack of jobs that this needed to be done? No. Was it overall a success? No. Was it completely unnecessary? Yes. And I've seen, if you look in my back catalogue, the statistics bear that out as well. But, as always, let me know down below what you guys think about this. If you think that, hey, no, Wasp, you're kind of overdoing it, and actually this is a nice thing and should be done, and you're right in saying that people who don't learn the history are doomed to repeat it. Or if you think, well, no, here we go again. Just even more subversive agendas. Let me know down below. Always intrigued to what you guys have to say. And as always, until next time, have a good one.